Speedrunning a game has taken many forms over the years, with categories covering a broad range of conditions, objectives, and challenges. Yet, any percent is usually the category that people witness first. That's because glitches and skips are some of the most unique and entertaining aspects of routing and running a game. The speedrunning community has grown so much over the years, so it's no surprise that big new titles have a large community effort to uncover everything. But what about new games that have barely any activity? How about the old ones that came out many years ago and have simply been forgotten or left to the title of cult classic? Communities for these games can be small and very inactive, possibly due to the lack of discoveries or optimizations. But sometimes, all it takes is a new runner with a new perspective. In some cases, this leads to games being broken wide open by one person. Welcome to the very first episode of my new series, where I strive to present and explain the amazing work that these individuals have contributed. This is the story of the speedrunner who overcame horror. Our story begins with an Australian runner and glitch hunter with a knack for finding some of the most ridiculous glitches and skips, mostly in the horror genre. His introduction to speedrunning was from TAS runs of Mortal Kombat 3, which, funny enough, he thought was an actual person. The curiosity of completing games quickly eventually led him to finding GDQ videos of Resident Evil and various other titles from 2015 and 2016 GDQ events. His interest in speedrunning led him to trying it out himself, thus the alias Hippo was born on February 22nd of 2018. His array of speedruns and discoveries started with a game called Visage. Visage is a first-person psychological horror game released in early access in 2018. It's your typical stuck-in-a-house horror game with very minimal mechanics. Those minimal mechanics made the other runners and I feel like it was impossible to bust open to make it more interesting and speedrun-friendly. But Hippo proved us wrong. He gravitated towards this game with an urge to experiment with things that no other player would have ever thought of trying. In December of 2018, Hippo popped into my chat at one point while I was messing with the game's run and told me that he had found something in the master bedroom. That something was a way to clip through the ceiling by climbing onto the bed and then crouching on top of a lamp on the bedside table. Crouching in this specific spot on the lamp will cause the game to misplace the character's position and clip you out of bounds onto the roof of the house. This moment not only blew my mind, but served as one of the only times I've ever had someone I barely knew come to my chat to show me a potentially massive discovery. It may not have led to any skips or time saves, but it was the only glitch in the game so far. These things do happen in many communities though. New players or runners will just emerge to share discoveries and attempt to help out. But I wouldn't be telling you this story if this was just a one-off type of thing like that. No, Hippo was just getting started. In this section of Chapter 1, the player must enter the right doors to find their way through puzzles involving moving things and finding key items, all while using the flash mechanic with the camera. It's not a very interesting section of the run, but all of that would change when Hippo would discover this. Seeing as this entire section is a maze that can only be completed by a linear set of objectives, the idea of being able to float around out of bounds was not only an incredible discovery, but the method in which Hippo discovered it was absolutely bonkers. Allow me to explain this process. He starts out by sitting in this chair to execute an exploit that we call save movement, which allows the player to move around and do certain things with the save menu open. Proceeding to the maze area with this open is important to the glitch, as Hippo will need to save and reload in a certain spot. But before he does that save, he brings up the task manager to set the affinity of his game to 1 core. Purposefully making the game perform and load slower will give Hippo a chance to deload and reload certain parts of this area, which he does by going down the stairs to the right and then going back up the stairs to set his affinity back to normal. He then sets it back to 1 core on the stairs to the left, which allows him to deload the upstairs. Here's where he makes a save, sets the affinity back to normal, and reloads the game. That reload not only puts him in a state where the game still isn't fully loaded, but this also activates the floating state. By aiming at the end of the room of the area from across the map and tapping forward ever so slightly, he can float to the exit, successfully skipping the entire thing. This blew everyone's mind. Even though this was patched later in the full release versions, it was an amazing discovery and proved that there could potentially be so much more to this game's speedrun than anyone would have ever thought. Not only did this show me how creative Hippo truly was, but that his perspective and approach to speedrunning would be a great contribution and asset to any game's community he would decide to join. Luckily, while Hippo was becoming an active speedrunner, I was graced with his presence regularly in my chat, where he would often share ideas and send me videos. Beyond that, he would become a friend and a moderator of my community on Twitch. Hippo's game choice and discoveries would only continue to become more fun and interesting, but I'm going to break down one more of the craziest skips in Visage before we move on. This is Cradle Skip. In Chapter 2, the player needs to solve a bunch of puzzles in order to acquire toys that attach to the baby cradle in the master bedroom. Attaching all of the toys will give the player a key to the box containing the vinyl record inside of it. That vinyl is one of the 2 items needed to complete the chapter. With Hippo's knowledge of deloading and reloading areas, he went to work. He found that the outdoors park area loads in at the staircase leading to it, which deloads part of the house. This loading trigger on the stairs is pretty close to the loading trigger a few steps away from the stairs, which loads the part of the house back in, while also deloading the outside area. With the proper affinity set, you can load the house trigger at the bottom by the paint cans, and then quickly turn around to hit the outside trigger on the stairs, causing the game to load a bunch of stuff from both areas. Once outside, the game starts to freak out. From here, you can make your way to the main staircase by taking this path to the left, but you have to be careful not to get stuck. If you make it to the main hallway with the staircase, you can very carefully nudge yourself onto the staircase by looking down at a slight angle and pressing left and right. You know you've gotten it when the player lifts up a little bit. If you pass the spot where you lift, the game will deload the house entirely and you'll have to retry. Once you're at the top, you crouch clip through the railing and perform a tricky load and deload on the wall on the stairs by either tapping forward and holding back, or walking into it and quickly turning around. If performed correctly, you'll spawn the master bedroom outside. Dropping down to the left here will allow you to keep the running speed you have from the outside area, which is important. But first, the vinyl. It's very obvious that you are not supposed to be able to look up at the master bedroom floor, because the floor and the box containing the vinyl does not have a floor that prevents the player from interacting with them. Therefore, you just yoink the vinyl through the bottom of the box, and bam, you skipped almost every single puzzle in the chapter. The great thing about this is that the door to transition back to the area to use the vinyl is spawned in when you do the loads correctly, and that allows you to keep your running speed throughout the rest of the chapter. All of this equals to about 15 minutes of time save. It's the biggest skip in the game, and it serves as another great example of what Hippo was capable of. After finding it himself, he successfully pulled off a run of both Chapter 1 and 2 together in 34 minutes, which was the last run before the full release of the game. Upon the full release, Hippo and I were eager to work together to get this game's run more attention, and he continued to find amazing things. Here's a quick montage of them before we move on to the other games he's contributed towards. With all of these skips, as well as a few others, Visage Any % is currently 30 minutes faster than the No Major Glitches category, and is one of the most surprisingly cool speedruns in this walking sim genre of horror games. All thanks to the mad lad himself. Hippo would continue to run a few other games right after this, such as Lost in Vivo, Dark, Blair Witch. Hell, he even helped me with Friday the 13th's virtual cabin mode, just for funsies. While these were all fun projects for him, the next big undertakings are 2 games that go hand in hand with each other: Condemned Criminal Origins and f.e.a.r. 2. Before we get into those, I'd like to share a bit more about Hippo on a more personal level. In October of 2019, Monolith held a speedrunning competition for a bunch of their games to celebrate their 25th anniversary. The prize for having the fastest time in a game was a one-of-a-kind poster signed by the developers. f.e.a.r. is a game I was already experienced with, and I felt confident in getting that one, but I really wanted the f.e.a.r. 2 and Condemned posters as well. Hippo, being the absolute gem that he is, decided that he would dive into both games to help me out with my goal of beating the records and winning those posters. What I did didn't know is related to what I had mentioned earlier with him becoming a valued member of my Twitch community. Hippo had a lot of time on his hands due to not being able to find work, which also resulted in something that many of us have also dealt with: depression. Hippo states that my streams and my community helped him through his depression every day, and that things are much better for him now, with work and mental health. I would like to take the time to state that while these things may have helped him, at the end of the day, he was the one who persevered and made it past that tough time in his life. Not only that, but he chose to run all of these other games that I mentioned in order to help out other various runners and their communities. The appreciation and thanks that he received helped lift his spirits, as well as some of the reactions that he got to his discoveries. I find it noble that during all of this, he took the time to help me win a couple of posters, and help many others tap into the full potential of their speed games, and I'm forever grateful for it. This is also a reminder to all of you who are watching that you're not alone and that things will get better. Now let me take you through all these skips and tricks that Hippo found in Condemned in f.e.a.r 2 for this fun little competition. Starting with Condemned Criminal Origins. It's a first-person horror game originally released in 2005 and was a unique title in many people's collections in the early 360 days. It also has one of the most memorable jump scares of its time.
Help me!
It was ported to PC shortly after its 360 launch, and this port has been busted wide open. It had some glitches and skips before Hippo got to it, but if it wasn't for him, this game would be a lot slower and a lot less interesting than it is currently. Let's get right into the action with Mission 2. Ethan is on the run from the FBI, making his way through the metro station of the city. One of the first mechanics you're introduced to here is using certain weapons as tools. The crowbar pries open panels, the axe breaks down doors, sledgehammers break locks, and so on and so forth. These usually involve a short fetch quest to get the weapon needed for the path to be opened, but Hippo didn't like that. So one of the first discoveries Hippo made is called headbanging. Headbanging is the act of clipping Ethan's head through walls and doors by increasing mouse sensitivity and dragging your mouse down while mashing forward. If performed correctly, Ethan's head will quite literally just clip through, allowing him to interact with things through walls, or in this case, unlock a door from the wrong side. This is used to skip a bit of extra traversal to acquire the sledgehammer, and is used again shortly after to clip into a wall to use a lever that powers an elevator. Headbanging is tricky in this game, but it's well worth mastering as it allows for some pretty big skips. In the library area of the game, where almost the entirety of the level is skipped, headbanging is used to clip through two locked doors. The first door allows Ethan to enter the main public library section, resulting in the game spawning Rosa getting taken away by Leland, and they're stuck. And then there's this guy here that you need to kill, so you take his gun, and then you headbang through the door to the right. In Condemned, some areas do have end-level triggers, and in this case, there is one right past this door that triggers a cutscene, which triggers the last fight to get Rosa to safety. The game proceeds as normal after hitting this trigger and leads to one of the biggest new time saves in the entire run. While headbanging may not be complex, let's get into a few skips that are a bit trickier. Deep in the metro level, you turn this valve in order to open up the passageway below, and then drop down the ledge to get to the next set of trains. Although, we won't be seeing any of those trains. Runs prior to Hippo's discoveries involved using quick saves and quick loads to not only duplicate interaction animations, but use those duplications to clip through walls and floors. With that knowledge, Hippo went through the game and searched for more animations to duplicate in hopes of finding new skips. This is one of those. The drop-down animation here can be duplicated by quick saving continuously until you get the "you cannot save now" message. If you're able to quick save frames before this message pops up, that means that your quick load will have Ethan start the animation all over again. This clips Ethan through the floor, dropping him into an out-of-bounds area, which is conveniently linked to this room right here. As stated earlier, there are triggers placed in certain spots that will activate events needed to progress or end a level. The trigger in this room is the end level trigger, meaning that the entire rest of the mission has been skipped, and all Ethan needs to do is climb some ladders and leave. At this point, Hippo is using a lot of prior knowledge from other skips to find new ones, but this last one that I'm going to show you is something quite special, and I have no idea how we thought of it. In the department store level, Ethan must traverse his way to the bottom floor in order to reach a supposed lead on the serial killer X that he's tracking down. As you cut through the store, there are a few boxes. You specifically need this one. By meleeing it through the window and all the way to this railing, you're ready to set up and perform Dropbox. By pushing the box into this corner, Ethan's positioning will be altered by it after quick saving and quick loading. After the quick load, you can mash forward and quick save, clipping Ethan through the railing entirely and dropping to the first floor. You break his ankles in the process, but it's not enough damage to be deadly. And just like that, you have one goofy-ass skip. And what's even more goofy is that Hippo single-handedly found so many skips and optimizations that the game went from a 134 to a 114, all because he wanted to help me win some posters. Again, I'm so grateful, but it is really funny to look back on. These are just a few examples of Hippo completely breaking this game, and before we move on to f.e.a.r 2, I'll play some clips of all the other skips he found while I explain a bit more about why I'm clumping these two games together. f.e.a.r 2 released in 2009 and was still being developed on the Lithtech engine, the engine that Monolith makes all of their games on. It is a notorious engine for broken speedruns, and while f.e.a.r, f.e.a.r 2, and Condemned all have similarities in their glitches and skips, Condemned and f.e.a.r 2 share something important in common. They are PC ports of games originally made for consoles, whereas the original f.e.a.r was a PC game ported to consoles. Clearly, unintended things occur with the use of PC-specific settings, mouse and keyboard binds, and frame rate, although one of these things was not what I was expecting when I started my f.e.a.r 2 speedrunning journey: sound acceleration error, or SAE for short. An unwritten law in speedrunning is to make sure that your run has audio. Well, this sound acceleration error trick involved disabling the sound device the game was using in your PC settings upon launching the game. A sound acceleration error message pops up on the screen, and the game proceeds as normal. Using this trick removes all audio from the game, and results in a handful of dialogue sections being skipped entirely. While the runs at the time allowed this, the world record holder Snowfats was actually convinced it shouldn't even be used. Not only was this a mission to win a one-of-a-kind poster, but it became a mission to beat the world record without sound acceleration error. With the creative mind of Hippo on my side, I knew it was possible. He wasn't just breaking one game this time, he was breaking two, all within a couple of weeks. There were already a few skips, much like how Condemned was, but again, Hippo took this game to a whole new level. Within the first few minutes of the run, Hippo found a way of skipping the first scripted fight in the game by doing a tricky set of jumps to pass through a part of the wall above the door that has no collision, allowing you to move on to the next section without fighting. Poor Lieutenant Stokes. That's not the last time we're leaving her in battle either. That's for later though. In the meantime, let's show off a very important discovery involving the infamous bullet time mechanic in the game. When activating an elevator in bullet time, it is possible to slip under the door before it closes. You would think that the door has priority and crushes you, but it doesn't. It just stops entirely, and even stays open after the elevator starts. After discovering that this was even possible, Hippo did a lot of testing on these elevators. On the very first elevator that this is possible, it's quite helpful for slipping through a set of beams, doing a tricky little crouch jump, and skipping waiting to go to the top and take the stairs down. Now that Hippo knows that not all doors have priority and just crush you to death, he put it to the test in other spots as well. Bullet time wasn't just helpful for these elevator doors, it helps with the trick directly after this, where you can use bullet time to reach a closing door just in time to wedge into it, forcing it to stay open. This specific trick does have a name. This is fine. Self-explanatory, really. You can't actually run through the fire here, as it'll insta-kill you, so once the fire from the pipe stops, you're safe to proceed. Silly names continue, with the next discovery being deemed the Vaseline Beam. Even though this wasn't found during the competition, I felt like I really just needed to share it. It's a new method of performing the original Stokes skip, which is only slightly faster, but makes a big difference when done optimally. The name comes from performing a precise jump onto this beam, which is extremely slippery. Try it and you'll know exactly what we mean. Next up, we have a nice set of skips at the school level, the first one appropriately named Playing Hooky. If you don't know what playing hooky means, it's when you skip class. American slang, yada yada. Anyways, this skip involves utilizing the slide kick and jump kick mechanics to reach the top of this rubble where this door can be accessed. Now, this is great for us, as we're now out of bounds, we can traverse past the classroom, and we can go straight into the locker hallway. This hallway is also pretty infamous. It's usually the most memorable, scary moment for people who've played this game. After this, we immediately perform one of the biggest new skips that Hippo found, the courtyard skip. Hippo found that if you're able to gain enough height height by jumping off of this bush, you can jump over the collision for this entire wall, which leads you to being completely out of bounds. A few careful jumps from this spot and you have completely skipped the entire beginning of this chapter, which then leads straight into another pretty big skip, Nurse's Office Skip. Nurse's Office Skip was established before Hippo's time with this game, but that addition of Courtyard Skip makes this level the shortest level in the entire run. This crazy sequence of skips makes the mid-game of this run super exciting, but also very difficult, and we're not even done yet. During the competition, the next level had a skip called Steakfist Skip, which was performed in its original way. Hippo did find a way of going out of bounds at the beginning after the elevator, but we simply weren't sure what the best way of traversing out of bounds was. The walls are paper thin and, well, it's dark. Like really, really dark, and the flashlight does not help. With such a high risk, we were convinced that getting past that locked door out of bounds was probably just going to be a very minimal time save. Years later, another runner and glitch hunter by the name of Matt would toy with it and find the new Snakefist skip we know today, an example of great minds thinking alike. The last big skip is done at the very end of the game, where instead of getting in the vehicle for the turret shootout, you crouch into a specific spot on top of this electric box thing and spam jump. This allows you to clear the wall and reach a part of the structure you're not supposed to have access to. By taking this ladder and running to the very back, you could slip out of bounds and carefully traverse to reach the room that opens up after the shootout. Luckily, when you press the button for the airlock, the game continues as planned. As you can see, this game is chock full of awesome skips, and later down the line, Hippo would find smaller time saves throughout the run as well. Without his knack for breaking games open, I think this run would have probably laid dormant for years, with an alarming lack of juicy tricks compared to the original f.e.a.r. And now it stands tall alongside it as a speedrun, and I personally think it's come a very long way, from an hour 25 all the way to an hour and 5 minutes. Finding 20 minutes of time save in a game of this length is no easy feat, especially when it's a game divided into individual chapters like this. Most of this time save was all Hippo, and his willingness to not only help me win those posters, but also his journey to glitch hunting greatness that makes me smile when looking back on amazing times like these. As we move into 2020, Animal Crossing saved us all, as kids and adults alike rejoiced over Tom Nook and Isabelle helping them live their best life on a virtual island, surrounded by cute animals. May we give praise to the New Horizons, as we shall never forget its warm embrace, saving us all from the darkness overtaking the world. Anyways, while that was happening, Hippo was getting into unique, speedy territory, finding things in games like Carry On, The Last of Us Part 2, Remothered Broken Porcelain, and breaking records in games like Alone in the Dark: The New Nightmare, and Resident Evil Gaiden. Much like the short list of games that he dove into before Condemned and f.e.a.r. 2, these were all fun little projects that he simply ran to improve records and maybe find a thing or two for future runners. After wrapping those up, he found a big discovery in Resident Evil Village's demo in May of 2021, showing the community how to use pipe bombs to clip through doors and walls. This is what led to other runners finding all of the possible skips in that game, but Village wasn't the Resident Evil game that Hippo really broke apart. That title goes to Resident Evil 4, but not the original game, the VR version of the original, released for the Quest 2 in October of 2021. Original RE4 is already full to the brim with skips and tech, so there's not much to be found there, but the virtual reality release of the game was looking mighty fine. Everything from the original speedrun carrying over to the VR version was possible, but unlikely, due to it being redesigned in Unreal Engine 4 for a completely different kind of experience. With all of that in mind, not only would Hippo have to dedicate quite a lot of time to experimenting, but he would need to do it all with the big old Quest 2 wrapped around his head. Despite that, he would give it his all, no matter how hard it could be. His first objective? Skipping the double El Gigante room in the castle. You can go out of bounds in the original to skip this fight entirely, but that's due to the Ditman glitch, which isn't possible in the VR version. The lack of Ditman means that a lot of the skips in the original just aren't going to carry over. Therefore, Hippo had to get creative to find out how to possibly pull this off. Based on the fact that most skips can be done on every version, he had a feeling that this was possible, just not with the same methods. This is going to sound pretty silly, but here's Hippo's explanation of the method he ended up finding. What it took for the El Gigante skip was holding down the power button on the headset while Leon was in midair for the few frames that he isn't touching any flooring, and clicking cancel in the power menu. The headset doesn't register his position after you hit cancel, and he'll be floating. Then you can use ledges and walls, if need be, to raise or lower your height. Yep, that's right. It wasn't the changes to the game that needed to be experimented with. It was the hardware itself. I find stuff like this really cool, but also very bizarre in the world of speedrunning. So, in this iteration of the skip, Hippo opens the power menu right before Leon gets off of the zipline. This suspends him in the air, allowing Hippo to run over to the other side of the room and have one of the Gigantes send him out of bounds. Just like that, double El Gigantes has been skipped and a method of going out of bounds has been found. Considering that this trick can be done anywhere in which Leon is even remotely off the ground, there are quite a few places that it can be used to skip rooms and events. One of the most unique sequence of skips specific to VR is the ability to skip the second half of Waterhall, as well as the transition from 3-1 to 3-2. In the original game, finishing Waterhall requires you to not only use the crank to lower the stairs, but also have Ashley use 2 cranks to raise the platform leading to the other side. In this run, you airwalk on those lowered stairs, use a few ledges to gain height, and simply walk to the exit. The funniest thing about this is that the platforms they're just there. They're there. They aren't visible without Ashley using the cranks, but they are there. She can hop across like normal, and the section is completed. That skip leads you to a 2-story room where the upper half isn't accessible yet. Proceeding normally leads to the end of the chapter where Ashley is separated from Leon and he must encounter the Navistadors at the beginning of the next chapter. After Navistadors, the upper half of this room is accessible, although the door on the upper half leading to the next section of 3-2 is there during 3-1. And it can be used normally. Therefore, setting up an airwalk on the staircase allows you to completely skip having to do all of that, which also leads to Leon dragging Ashley through areas the game originally wouldn't expect you to. Doing this changes the way that the game behaves, including despawning the dogs entirely from the maze, despawning the shield guys in the room before 3-3, and raising the gate in that room ahead of time, meaning you don't have to go around. Thankfully, the game doesn't break further when you do reach 3-3, and the game places Ashley in the trap that you originally had skipped anyways. While this is the most unique skip, there are quite a few more that you would never see in the original game. An infamous section of Resident Evil 4 is fighting alongside Lewis while defending the cabin. Staying inside the cabin seems mandatory, but with the power of the new out-of-bounds method, Hippo found that using it on the cabin stairs at the right height allows you to slip through the windows on the first floor. Surprisingly, the typewriter in the small hut outside is already loaded in, and it can be used to save and reload, successfully tricking the game into thinking that the chapter had been completed. I love these types of sequence breaks because skipping end chapter screens is something that was never thought to be possible. Another thing that was never thought to be possible, which everyone really wishes was possible for many years, is skipping just about anything in chapter 5-4. Infamously loved for Mike, yet equally hated for its barrage of turrets, crossbows, and bullshit stunlock deaths. While it's still mandatory to go through the door at the bottom level of the war room, Hippo found that there's a way to completely avoid traversing through most of it, and instead initiates a floating state on these stairs. After that, he can slide through this gap in the wall to get out of bounds, and pull the levers to open that end door through the wall. All he has to do now is clip back in bounds to jump down the ladder and leave. Not only does this make one of the most stressful rooms in the game pretty free, but it also saves a nice chunk of time. There are so many cool tricks in this run, and I think it's some of the most interesting work that Hippo has done on a game. It's a unique version of a beloved game with arguably cooler skips than the original, and it makes for a very entertaining VR run. I know that VR can make some people feel a little queasy, but if you're not one of those people, this is one of my most recommended runs, not only to try out, but to also watch in Hippo's arsenal. At this point in time, Resident Evil 4's VR version wasn't the only new version of the game. Resident Evil 4 Remake was on the horizon, as it was announced to release in March of 2023. As we all waited months for that, Hippo decided to spend some more time working on his personal bests in a few other games, and even found a big skip in another indie title called Madison. just for fun, you know? Around this time, Hippo had actually saved up for a car and was on the search for more work, so all of his free time being spent on gaming and messing around with speedrunning wasn't going to be on the table for much longer. But he would make one last huge contribution to the speedrunning community beforehand, a set of amazing skips upon the release of a Resident Evil 4 remake. A familiar name from earlier peeks into this game as well, as Matt's discovery of the rifle clipping method is what allowed Hippo to discover some of these big skips I'm about to show you. While I've covered these before in a video, I felt that these were very important to Hippo's legacy. We begin with the first skip he discovered being the Garrador and Sword Puzzle skip, or Early Waterhall for short. The huge door in this hallway here can be clipped through via the rifle clipping method. Rifle clipping is done by aiming the scoped rifle with Leon's back turned to a door or a wall and holding back. Leon's back will be slightly clipped into whatever wall or door you're against, which allows you to do some pretty wacky stuff. In this case, Hippo decided to try and whip his aim right or left while hitting the interact button to see if Leon would try to open the door from the wrong side, which is exactly what happened, thus skipping the first encounter with the Garrador enemy, as well as an entire puzzle. With this new discovery, Hippo decided to try and clip through many more doors. But unfortunately, most doors don't work similarly to how the door to Waterhall works, and there wasn't much success. Hell, even the biggest theoretical skip of going from the new Vistador's ballroom to the Salazar Tower led to a soft lock. But the next theory that Hippo had ended up being massive. A way to skip not only the substation at the start of chapter 14, but also the Wrecking Ballroom. Not only can you clip through this door, but it's also the easiest one to clip through in the entire game. Obviously, this made the speedrun much faster, but it went beyond that. The entire player base of Resident Evil 4 Remake, who were looking to acquire that fancy S+ ranking on professional difficulty, saw this skip as a huge help. So many people ended up utilizing it for that extra bit of time and resource management that Capcom had to eventually address it in a patch. While Hippo and the rest of us understand their decision, it's pretty wild to think that a speedrunning discovery like this was loved so much by so many that Capcom had to put a stop to everyone using it to make getting their S+ professional achievements easier, even though this phenomenon led to big creators and streamers reposting without credit. It was pretty obvious that it had a huge impact on the Resident Evil community at large, and the enjoyment Hippo had from that alone made it oh so worth it. Chapter 14 skip practically went viral with short-form videos, tweets, and articles showing it off. While Hippo and I and many other speedrunners had a good laugh over all of this publicity, it was truly Hippo's most popular discovery, and it was pretty cool. And even though this was Hippo's most popular discovery, it was also his last big one. You see, nowadays, Hippo's working full-time and focusing on his mental and physical health more. It's safe to say that his gaming time is a bit limited now, but those glitch hunting skills, well, they never truly leave. He still finds skips here and there for random games in his free time, which I usually find out about through Discord. My hope for this series is to make sure that folks like Hippo have their names written in the books of speedrunning history. That is why I decided to cover it in this first episode, which I can only hope that many of you enjoyed and will continue to watch in the future. Making these is no easy task, so please make use of all of the free ways that you can support and share it around. Leave a like, subscribe if you haven't done so yet, post a comment about your favorite Hippo discovery, or even check out some of the other cool videos that I've made in the past. I'll just go ahead and leave some of them on the end screen for you. A big thanks to Hippo yet again, and a big thanks to you for watching. Much love, and I'll see you in the next episode.